Your company likely wants you back in the office. In the last year, the number of large global employers who have implemented some sort of mandate to have you return to the office has increased significantly. Apparently, coming back to the office is better for business and better for culture, supposedly at least. Unsurprisingly, a lot of staff have either rebelled and chosen to find other employment, while others, those who perhaps maybe have no immediate options, choose to return reluctantly. This raises a lot of fascinating questions. What are the real reasons companies are giving for this? What effect does remote and hybrid work actually have on business performance? And how do we deal with remote work? Let's get stuck in. Hybrid work and remote work accelerated massively because of one thing: COVID. Because of the near global lockdown, millions of employees were forced to work from home. A study from Stanford University shows that somewhere between 10 and 50% of employees at different companies work fully remote. Independent contractors, individual business owners are obviously at the high end, but even at companies with more than 5,000 employees, more than 15% of staff work fully remote. For companies with anywhere between 10 and over 5,000 employees, there's a range of 50 to 70% of staff that are fully in office, with the rest, so between 50 and 30%, on some sort of remote or hybrid model. When you take into account that this includes all types of workers, including factory workers and restaurant workers and people who work in stores who for obvious reasons have no other option than to show up for work, then that's actually a pretty high proportion. The sectors with the highest work from home and hybrid rates are information, finance, professional services. So basically, the more work that gets done behind a desk, the more remote and hybrid work is allowed. What's interesting to note, though, is that already before COVID, remote and hybrid work was increasing. COVID did not suddenly create remote and hybrid work. Prior to COVID, US rates were at about 7%. As we all know, in the last couple of years, the news has been full of stories of big companies attempting to get people back into the office. Now, there's no mandate for you to subscribe to this channel, but if you do enjoy the content and you find it relevant and interesting, then I really suggest you click that subscribe button. It really helps out the channel. Thanks a ton. We're starting with the stated reasons that companies openly give, and we'll get to the other reasons later in the video. But first up is collaboration. More often than not, companies point to a decline in collaboration and innovation. Companies and CEOs speak about how decisions and processes slow down and the lack of interaction between employees leads to worse business performance, at least on a theoretical level. Some companies are open about the fact that they are stuck with expensive leases that they cannot get out of and feel the need to use those office spaces. Business leaders also point to a devolving culture of a company due to the missing vibe in the office. Business leaders feel that there's a declining commitment to the company's goals and mission, and that this decline is at least in part a consequence of the disengagement they feel is exacerbated by remote and hybrid work. They believe that in-person interaction is crucial to embedding employees in the company identity and fostering a sense of belonging.
Back 5 days a week.
The laptop class is living in La La Land, okay? As I said, you can't, but look at the cars. Are people working from home here? Of course not. So the people were, building cars, servicing the cars, building houses, fixing houses, making the food, making all the things that people consume. It's messed up to assume that yes, they have to go to work, but you don't.
Another stated reason is solidarity. This is not so much a tech thing, but it has been seen at companies like Tesla and Starbucks and Amazon. These are companies where a large portion of employees have to come to work or to the store. And these companies have used the argument that it's unfair that some people have to come to work while others get to work at home. So to cultivate a we culture and a team culture, they push to have all staff in the office. There are other reasons as well that depend on the sector. Data security, compliance, stuff like that. Employees that handle sensitive data are not being allowed to do so from home. Client expectations is also a commonly occurring reason given. Clients expect to meet their suppliers face-to-face, and expecting FaceTime also puts pressure on RTO mandates. Those, though, are pretty much the stated reasons, but there are others. We all know that. What are the other reasons? It's to get rid of staff. At a macro level, RTO is about getting people to quit. The tech sector, which has overhired and overextended itself and needs to pump stocks, is leading the charge on RTO mandates to incentivize resignations. The math is usually simple. Depending on local laws, getting people to quit is often cheaper than mass redundancies or mutual exit agreements. When layoffs are high, companies use RTO mandates to encourage voluntary turnover.
We found return to office mandates are more likely in firms with male and powerful CEOs. They are used to working in the office for 5 days a week, and they feel that they are losing control over their employees who are working from home.
The Stanford report and Harvard Business Review highlight that older male CEOs are more likely to mandate RTO, partly because the tech sector, dominated by older men, heavily enforces these mandates. These leaders who built their careers on long hours and face-to-face interactions prefer office presence for control and trust reasons. They believe in-person management is more effective and assume remote workers are less hardworking. Interestingly, this is nothing new. Go back a couple of hundred years and the clothing industry was massively made up of small home-working seamstresses and other workers who made clothing parts at home. These parts were picked up and sold in stores. With the advent of industrialization, those jobs went into factories. This led to a lot of efficiency and a massive increase in output, but one thing that you'll often see in photos of those factory floors is that of the shop floor supervisor. The man, usually, who watches over everybody and visually controls that people are being productive. This practice has, for some managers, never changed. Sight is a control mechanism. The logic applied is also, we had a great culture, then we started working from home, and that resulted in a bad culture. That's the logic at play. Basically, because people don't come to the office for free pizza, then the vibe has been destroyed.
Well, I generally come in at least 15 minutes late. I use the side door, that way Lumberg can't see me. And after that, I just sort of space out for about an hour.
The counterpoint is, if your culture was truly great, people would seek it out. Those choosing to work from home perhaps weren't ever swayed by office gimmicks like loud music, free juices, and foosball machines. Some people never cared for it. They just did their work and went home. And yes, some people do enjoy it and they stay. You might argue that those are the people you want to hire, but that's what we HR people call groupthink. This is where we get to the facts, and I love these facts. The first fact is admittedly a little bit anecdotal, but I'm confident that it holds true. It's been really hard for me to find a company that, to my knowledge, has stated a direct link between remote and hybrid work and their actual top and bottom line business performance. There is research on individual roles like customer service and call centers and how that affects it. I'll get to those examples. But at a high business level, the correlation has only been talked to but never been established by companies. At least I've had a hard time finding it. It's exceedingly difficult to find literature or company reports that can substantiate a meaningful decline in top or bottom line business performance as a result of remote work. Now that's the anecdote. Then there's the more historically proven data. The fact is, Stanford and a couple of other universities in the US and UK have been studying this for decades.
Now, the other important thing in the study is we pointed out, look, what firms care about ultimately is profitability. And it turns out that if you have an employee that's remote, you also save a lot of costs. So you're saving about 10% less overhead because you don't have an office. And then you can hire these folks, maybe nationally or internationally, maybe save another 20, 30, 40%. Remote workers, they may be 5, 10% less productive, but they are so much cheaper that it's profitable for firms to have many teams, many employees remote.
Companies that allow some degree of remote or hybrid work deliver better business results on the top and bottom line. They have higher employee engagement. They have lower turnover. Also, for women and disadvantaged groups, remote and hybrid work leads to higher levels of employment. People who might otherwise choose or not be able to work at all are more likely to have a job when a hybrid or remote model is available. For the US specifically, on average, a remote or hybrid model leads to overall lower salary costs. This is down to the fact that you can hire people outside of expensive employment areas, opting instead to bring on people who live somewhere cheaper and consequently are okay with being paid a little bit less. Remote and hybrid workers are also generally more inclined to accept a lower salary in exchange for greater flexibility. When it comes to focused team and individual productivity, there's some interesting things that are shown in data in isolated studies. Here, the data is a bit more of a mixed bag. These studies don't contradict the general trend that engagement is higher, turnover is lower, and business performance is better. But they do dive into how remote work can affect performance in specific roles and specific scenarios. In some research, in some roles, productivity overall does drop, but it is offset by the extra hours that are put in due to, for example, a reduction in commute time. Simply put, work gets done at the same level. The input basically drops, but the output stays the same. It's not all positive though. Yes, turnover is lower on average, engagement is higher. The net effect of less commute and less productivity is more or less an equalization. But there are groups where it's been proven to be, at least in some instances, less positive in some studies. In one study, younger and less experienced staff were shown to get less feedback and the quality of their work suffered. This applied to call center employees, where one study showed call quality was demonstrated to be measurably lower, and the number of resolved cases was also measurably lower for less experienced employees. The research, though, shows both sides of the coin. Another study showed a call center becoming more efficient, with an overall increase of 13%, of which 9% was attributed to working more minutes per shift and 4% from more calls per minute. In certain studies of software engineers, they showed that less experienced software engineers who were less exposed to peer feedback on completed code were prone to making worse code, with more faults being identified later in the review process. From my own personal network, I have a colleague that works at a business that has a large number of admin personnel that process forms and paperwork. The company tracks performance very closely, and employees consistently deliver higher throughput at the same qualities when working from home. Importantly, when there are negative effects in terms of productivity and knowledge transfer and quality, they are, if not exclusive, but at least majorly related to fully remote setups. Hybrid arrangements, at least in the research, seem to negate, if not all, then most of the negative effects of productivity, knowledge transfer, collaboration. And again, it's important to emphasize, you can find research showing some teams or roles performing both better or worse, but at the company level, the results are always a net positive. Let's just recap the facts. Remote and hybrid work is cheaper for the company in general, engagement is higher, turnover is lower. Negative productivity effects are inconclusive in some places. The effects are minimal, and where they are negative, it's centered on specific types of roles and especially towards younger and less experienced staff. The business leader's argument about collaboration is tenuous at best. The solidarity argument is also not one that is founded in any measurable discontent. Stating that remote or hybrid work isn't without its challenges would be wrong, and that's where we get to my take. I've worked with businesses for 25 years. I've got a background in pharma tech and consulting. I've held C-suite roles in human resources, and these are the things that I think about remote and hybrid work. Remote and hybrid work is still something a lot of managers and companies do not know how to work with. Managers receive minimal training on structuring team collaborations in dispersed environments. While people spend years getting a degree, systematic leadership training is often condensed into short 2, 6, or 10-day courses. Whether managing a remote team or one at a different office site, the approach to follow-up, interaction, productivity, and collaboration remains the same. Managing a dispersed team is more challenging, but it is possible with the right management prioritization of leadership. My own experience is managers that prioritize regular contact and regular interactions are significantly better at dealing with hybrid and remote setups. Managers that struggle are the ones that are used to a more informal and unstructured approach. These are the managers that kind of just walk around and talk with whoever's there. Often, they have a harder time with remote work. I personally don't believe managers who equate presence with control are the strongest managers. Control is a poor foundation for leadership, and presence doesn't guarantee productivity.
Space out?
Yeah, I just stare at my desk, but it looks like I'm working.
Office workers can waste their time just as easily as remote workers. I mean, who hasn't spent half an hour in the bathroom doom-scrolling TikTok just to get a break? Alt-tabbing and sitting with your back to the window is also not a new tactic. The issue isn't hybrid or remote work, it's how it's managed. Bad management leads to poor remote work performance, while good management leads to good performance. Now, have I experienced a manager coming to me and asking what to do about an employee who's fully remote, who almost certainly is working somewhere else at the same time? Yes, and it was the case. But those cases are few and extremely far between. You shouldn't be designing your policies around the edge cases. There is a legitimate case for investing in better training. New employees, junior employees, they need more feedback. Does that mean they can't work remotely? Not necessarily, but it does require another level of structure to something that may have happened organically before. That code review that happened before, because some guy randomly looks someone over the shoulder in the office, needs a structure for it to happen now. I do think, though, it's important to keep in mind the random nature of the historical over-the-shoulder conversation. Sometimes it happened, but sometimes it didn't. It's not like it was a perfect system that automatically led to some employees learning from their colleagues. But remote and hybrid work does demand more structure. A UK study shows remote workers are promoted less and slower than those in hybrid or in-office roles. Is that fair? Not necessarily. This is partly because the relationship becomes more transactional in a fully remote setup. The desire to expand the role's complexity and scope is less. The desire to add the complexity and scope to the role is inherently less. Management roles which require presence and mobility are typically not given to remote workers. This creates a hard ceiling for remote employees, a challenge that a lot of companies haven't solved. The bigger conversation that I find more interesting is what this whole remote hybrid return to the office conversation says about the relationship between employers and employees. Now, I've only had this channel for a while and I'm already getting the reductive comments of, oh, he's HR, he's on the side of management. And that's true, but not on this channel. This is my spare time. So when I say this, it's me talking. My dad was very clear. He had his own business, but he was also at times an employee. And he always said to me, a job is just a job. That was his generation. Now for me, I grew up with looking for purpose and a company that had values that resonated with my own. And I and others like me have sought out purpose, and companies have tried to articulate some sort of compelling purpose for me. Today, things have changed. Back in my dad's day, there was at least some implicit deal that if you did your job, you would be employed forever. Today, that's not the case. For a lot of employees, company purpose and company values are increasingly coming across as disingenuous. Employees, to a large extent, feel that they are treated as expendable, and as a result, they behave as such. Everything becomes a transaction. Engagement suffers, and turnover goes up. Jamie Dimon of Morgan Stanley had this interesting rant a while back where he complained about how people at Morgan Stanley, even before they joined Morgan Stanley, already had an exit lined up in 2 years' time. Where's the loyalty, he stated? Well, he hires tons of unpaid interns. He fires people for minor transgressions and to line his pockets, and he berates people and employees publicly. Why wouldn't employees treat their employment as a transaction? He's giving them no reason to do anything else. The expectation that the more you pay people, the more they have to put up with is just one that doesn't sell as well as it used to. And it's the same with this whole RTO thing. For many companies, there's little to no factual data that supports that they, on a top or bottom line level, have been negatively impacted as a business from allowing staff to some extent to work in a hybrid or remote setup. The reasons for return to office are often disingenuous at best. If there was a problem with the culture, it was likely broken long before people started working from home. Now, as a company, you can do as you choose. It's perfectly legitimate to just want everyone in the office. That's fine if you feel that's important to you for some reason. But remote and hybrid work is well researched and well documented to be a net positive. It does take work. Using it as a way to get people to leave is unfortunately just something that further degrades the trust between employer and employee. Share your thoughts about remote work and hybrid work in the comments. Where do you see it going? And also remember to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching. See you soon.